And so, welcome to the Leading Through Change, Confidence and Clarity in Tough Conversations webinar. So, we have about an hour set aside for us here today. And like I said, I like to make these as interactive and engaging as possible. And so, please feel free, we're a smaller group, feel free to come off mute if you have any questions or would like to share from your experience or kind of chime in from there. We can also leverage the chat. And so I have a few polls that will come up, a few maybe questions that will leverage the chat just to get to hear from what you're looking for. And yeah, let's make this as engaging and a great learning experience for our time here together. And so for those of you that maybe haven't had an opportunity to maybe participate in one of our past webinars or know Intuitive Performance, I'll just go through a few of the things that we do here. And so for us, elevating team performance really starts with understanding your people and working with a lot of organizations across industries. What we realize is, at the end of the day, people are the foundation of your organization, and an investment in your people is an investment in your company. And so the way that we work is we really partner with the HR function and helping them build out that people foundation. And the way we do that is through things like leadership coaching. So looking at elevating leadership amongst all levels of your organization, and so not just leaving it just for the executives, but ensuring that, managers are trained and have the support they need, stepping into new roles, or even learning how to manage managers, which is a whole transition within itself. We also offer what we call as team coaching. And so it's this idea of really being able to bring together leaders or managers to be able to discuss different challenges or make commitments around how are they working and how are they collaborating together as a team. We also have our whole person leadership cohort, which supports managers and executives at each step of the leadership journey, whether you're a new manager stepping into a new role, all the way up to emotionally intelligent leadership, and how can we practice more emotional intelligence in the workplace. And then finally, we also have whole person development, which can range anywhere from a 2-hour workshop with your organization all the way up to different micro series or speaking engagements, really customized to your team and the everyday experiences that your employees are engaging in. And so that's just a little bit of background about Intuitive Performance. We're also a WEBE Canada certified organization, so women-led and women-owned, which is also recognized in the US under the WBENC certificate level. And so if you are looking to fulfill any of your supplier diversity needs, we're always here to help, and we love to have that type of conversation. Otherwise, just quickly a little bit about myself. I'm an ACC coach with the International Coaching Federation. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. I've also facilitated and trained. I think I need to update this number. It's probably closer to 4,000 or 5,000 professionals around, leadership development, looking at developing better business habits in the workplace, and things along those lines. And I'm also the co-founder and COO here at Intuitive Performance. And so as the weather is starting to finally get a little warmer, you'll likely find me on the weekends out on my bike. And this used to be a picture of our puppy, but now is a picture of Mila, our 9-month-old daughter. And so if you hear any crying in the background, that's just her saying hi to everybody from there. A couple housekeeping things before we really jump into it. Like I mentioned before, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, come off mute. Would love to hear from you. In a group discussion, the only thing I ask is rather than providing advice, really just look to share from your experience. And what we realize from that perspective is it allows people to take away what they feel will have the biggest impact for them and kind of leave the rest. And so really kind of promoting that sharing from your experience kind of approach. And if you need to step away, just feel free to drop a quick note in the chat. We understand these things happen. It's the middle of the workday, and sometimes things come unexpectedly. And so before we jump in, I'd just like to kick us off with a poll just to have a better understanding of what might make this a really impactful workshop for you. And so you should have this just in front of you. And so I'd like to better understand, what aspects of communicating change would you like to learn a little bit more about? And so we have, preparing empathetically for conversations, using clear and positive language, building and maintaining trust, or understanding how to adapt to others' responses. And so I'll give about a minute here to allow people to chime in and add their input. Give it another 10 seconds here. Okay. And so it seems like we have quite a range. I'll share the results with everybody here. So some people are looking to learn a little more around how can we use clear and positive language. Others are looking at how do we build and maintain that trust, and even understanding how to adapt to others' responses. So no, that's fantastic. And so that's good because this is what we'll be covering today. And so one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is, understanding change. And so I came across this Forbes stat that said that 70% of all change initiatives within organizations fail. And I don't know, I felt like that was a pretty astounding stat to read. And I actually would like to get some of your input. Maybe we can use the chat box for this. In your experience, what are some primary reasons that you feel like initiatives for change fail? Maybe it's something that you've noticed within your own organization, or maybe something that just comes top of mind when you're thinking about implementing new changes within the workplace, how they might be impacting people. What are some of those reasons why these change initiatives may fail? And I'll give you a moment just to type it in the chat. Missy says not involving all and or the right parties. Okay. And so maybe some parties might be on board, some might not even know what's going on and it's just getting pushed towards them. Maria's talking about main SMEs are not involved in decisions. So decisions are being made at the top, and maybe they're not getting the input from everybody else within the organization. And so they might not have all the information at their disposal to be able to make these decisions. I've seen that quite often as well. Monica's talking a little bit lack of clear upfront communication. So how are we actually preparing staff for change, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we're going to make this change within an organization. This is how it's going to be done moving forward. Executives are on board. What about the team members? How are we communicating those things to our team members so that they feel like there's buy-in and feel like their voices are being heard? Sarah also says a lack of leadership buy-in. Great. So some leaders are bought in, others might not be bought in. And now there's a disconnect, right? Like what's the ripple effect of having that disconnect from a leadership level across the whole organization when you see some members actually practicing this new change and some that aren't? As an employee, that's a really difficult position to be put into. Missy's mentioning also not understanding or foreseeing the effects of change, right? Yeah, so taking a little bit of foresight from there. And then Monica mentioning, from timing, change has a large impact, and sometimes the timing of when these things are implemented, not just the how, can have a really big impact on things moving forward. Fantastic. Okay. And so kind of building on what has been mentioned here already, some of the challenges, and even building on more around how are we communicating this change? What are some of the challenges that come up? Some things can look like uncertainty and fear, right? When we're communicating change, oftentimes it can bring up uncertainty and fear amongst employees or team members. You also might face employee resistance. Some employees don't want to change. They like the way that things are, right? And so how do you manage and how do you deal with employee resistance and actually communicating these changes effectively to ensure that there's buy-in and trust built from there? Team alignment, we've already touched on this, right? What if some leaders are actually exercising this shame and some are not? It puts employees in a very difficult position because there's not a seamless or a consistency across the board. It can also lead to employee burnout. Misunderstandings is a big one here around not setting clear expectations around why this change is happening and now what is actually expected of employees or team members based on these new changes. Can be a lack of clarity. Looking at sustaining change, I think, is a big one here. It's great to say, hey, we're going to make this change, but how are we going to make this sustainable? Who are the champions of change amongst the organization that are ensuring that they're being role models on what does this change look like for us and for the team? And finally, even just a low commitment. If you have a low commitment level with anybody amongst the organization, it can really have a ripple effect and really make change hard from there. I just want to welcome Anna. Thank you for joining us here. Carolyn as well. Thanks for jumping in. More than happy to have you here. I mentioned it before. Feel free. We're going to use the chat a little bit today. You can also come off mute. Love to hear from you. And let's make this as interactive as possible. And so looking at what we're going to cover today are three main points. One is looking at planning with empathy. So learning how to prepare for tough or sensitive conversations by better understanding your team's feelings and perspectives. This planning really helps ensure that your message is being well received and even respected from team members. The next piece we'll look at a little bit is around how do you speak clearly and positively around these changes? So, what's a framework that we can kind of lean on in terms of how we're speaking about these changes from that perspective and ensuring that people are on board and there is, avoiding some of that miscommunication and ensuring clarity moving forward. And then finally, the importance of fostering a trusting environment, especially when changes are happening within an organization, ensuring that there's a really heavy emphasis on trust within an organization can really have a profound impact on how change is being adopted. It's so much easier to adopt change with a manager or leader that you trust and believe in. So even if you don't know exactly why decisions are being made, or even if you don't agree with them, if you have trust within your organization, people will still move forward with them despite that disconnect. So let's take a look a little bit around planning with empathy. And so empathetic planning is really the heart of effective change communication. And so when we're looking at empathetic planning, how does empathetic planning really impact communication change? So taking a look at things around how are we planning out changes by being empathetic to the stakeholders and the people that will actually impact this change will actually impact. It helps build trust and buy-in from team members, helps enhance employee morale and engagement. It really does look at minimizing, negative impact on performance and making sure there's longevity there. Helps promote, innovation and creativity, and even fosters a culture of continuous improvement. And so I think it was Forbes actually, I feel like I've mentioned Forbes a couple times already, but they did a stat around teams with empathetic leadership are 76% more likely to report high engagement. And so there's a clear correlation between empathetic leadership and higher levels of engagement. And, from a personal note, what I've noticed is, when you do lead with empathy, you show understanding, you provide other team members a voice, and try to see things from their side of things. It does help build up that trust and adaptation as you move forward. But a real question really comes down to, how can we actually do this? And so that's one of the things that intuitive performance that we really try to hone in on isn't just like, okay, great, empathetic planning sounds nice, Scott, but how am I doing that within my team? And what does that look like within the workplace? And so for some of you, you might have seen this in the past. For some of you, this might be new. But one of the things here that we have is an empathy, it's called the empathy map. And it's a way of really being able to better step into the shoes of your team members or your employees and be able to see and feel what they might be going through and how these changes might be impacting them. And so I'll take a moment here. We can kind of go through this map. And so if we go on, just on the left-hand side here, what do they hear? I'll adapt this to maybe what are colleagues saying? What is leadership and C-suite saying about things? What are influences around them saying about the changes that are happening? And then at the top, what do they think and feel? So what do they think about this change? What parts of this change really matter to them? And what might be some of their preoccupations around how this change might impact them and or even impact their worries or even aspirations within the organization? And then what are they seeing? What do they see within the environment, within their colleagues? And what are they seeing within leadership? We mentioned one of the challenges with implementing change is ensuring consistency across all leaders. And so what are they seeing within your organization based on these new changes that have been implemented? And then finally here, what do they say and do? And more importantly, is there a disconnect between what they say and what they're actually doing? And so here is, what is the attitude within the workplace? What's the appearance that kind of shows up? What's their behavior towards others? And then digging a little bit further into this is being able to further understand, like, what is the actual pain that they might be going through when experiencing this change? What kind of fears might come up? What kind of frustrations or even obstacles they might encounter along the way? And then being able to flip that around. As a manager, being able to think about their fears, frustrations, obstacles, and be able to show them, well, actually, these are the gains that you might get that might be even worthwhile going through some of those pains to be able to achieve these gains. So what are their wants or needs? How are they measuring success? And kind of helping even how do you overcome some of these obstacles from there? And so I'd like to take a moment and we'll actually go through a little bit around how you might be able to use an empathy map within your team when implementing change. And I might argue that this could be useful not just when you're implementing change within an organization or communicating change, just on a general level, having a better understanding of how your teams feel see, hear, and do can be really impactful and help support you as a manager in supporting them. And so looking at an empathy map at work, the first thing you need to do is identify the stakeholder group. Who's taking part in this, who's being impacted by the change that's coming up, and let's get them involved and have a better understanding where they're coming from. Which leads to the second point, gathering data and insights. So being able to, either talk to the people that are involved. It could be as formal as actually interviewing them or providing a survey. It could be just based on observations or even just getting their feedback on how they feel about things. And then once you have some more of that information, now it's looking at creating your own empathy map template and then actually filling it out. Going through these things and being able to write down what you've observed, what you've heard, what you've talked to other people about, and populating it this way. And then once it's actually populated, now you actually have an ability to look at everything, analyze the results, and say, hey, what do I want to do with this? This gives me a really high level view of how my team is feeling about the current changes that are occurring. Now, what do we want to do about it? It'll give you an opportunity to look at different opportunities or challenges that might come up. And then from there, actually looking at developing actionable strategies. What can we do to help move the team forward to ensure that we're not in that 70% group of, change initiatives that fail, but rather we're in the 30% that can move things forward and ensure that there's sustainability in how we're changing things within the organization. And then, like anything else, it's never a one and done thing. We're always looking to iterate and be able to refine as you're moving things forward, recognizing that change isn't always easy. I'll pause here just for one moment. I'll just check in. Do we have any questions around how you might be able to use the empathy map within your organization, or even like why you should be looking at something like this as a way of being able to navigate change or better understand your team members? I'm actually curious, has anybody seen the empathy map in the past or maybe utilized it? Monica, yeah? If you don't mind me asking, how did you feel? Was it impactful for the team members or was it being utilized? What was coming up from your experience from a fractional HR perspective? Oh, sorry, I'll just
I,
wait.
yeah, sorry. I learned and used the empathy map in my coaching practice, not so much in corporate
Mm,
practices. I mean, some of the I don't consciously get my managers a room and go, okay, what do we think and feel? It's like it's just natural,
mm.
because that's what I've been trained as a coach.
All right, fantastic. Great. So this is something more in the back of your mind, something that you can utilize and kind of leverage as you're working through with people and not necessarily a formal piece. And
And it's really, in fact, as you were showing this, I was going to ask, will we get copies of the slides?
we do have a recording of the video, but let me
Recording
take
of
a
the video.
look.
Okay, that's fine. Because I just want to find out. I think some managers might really appreciate seeing this empathy map. And
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of using it in the workplace like as obvious as that.
and I understand that the coach sometimes you're using tools just by habit and don't even realize they're there. And I love the idea of being able to share this further with a wider spread group. So more than happy, what I'll do is I'll send a link to the map, or even if you Google empathy map, you'll find some different images that kind of come up as well from there. Perfect. Otherwise, I think there's a few people who mentioned it's their first time. Great. Well, again, I think Monica brings up a great point. It's nice to say that, yes, I took the time, I filled out this empathy map, I have a good understanding. At times, in a busy and high-paced workplace, we don't have the time, we don't have the capacity to be able to do these things. And so even just having these questions in the back of your mind as to what does my team members think and feel? What do I see within them? What are they hearing? What are they saying and doing? Even being able to ask yourself these questions can have a real big impact on how you're looking to support them and be a more empathetic leader, especially amongst change. And so finally here, just a few tips around empathetic planning tips. One, and I think the empathy map really covers this, really looking at putting yourself in your team member's shoes. And so, this isn't just imagining how they feel, but deeply understanding their fears, their hopes, their concerns. You also want to be able to look at, communication. It's not just about what you say, it's about what's heard. And so, being able to use empathetic listening as a tool to guide your conversation planning. So it's one thing to tell somebody something, but what have they really heard? How is it impacting them? And is it understood? is there a disconnect between what you've said and what they've heard? And the third piece here is just looking to prepare for a range of emotions and responses. It's recognizing that, everybody deals with change differently. Some might raise their hand and tell you all their fears and concerns right off the get-go. Others might hold them inside and actually just say that I'm fine, this sounds great, and might take a little coaxing to better understand how you can support them because they might be battling this on their own. So recognizing how you can adapt to different team members based on their own working styles can be really important as well. So moving on to the next section here around speak clearly and positively. We're going to look at a framework around how we can actually communicate change to make it a little bit more effective and kind of bring down some concerns and things that kind of come up. We're going to look a little bit around the difference between curiosity and judgment, and then how we can communicate change effectively. And so I'm actually curious, I'm going to pull up another poll here, and I'd like to just get a better understanding when communicating change, what has been the biggest challenge for you? And give me one second. So when communicating change, what has been the biggest challenge for you? Has it been ensuring the message is clear and understood, managing team members' resistance to change, maintaining morale amongst team members, managing emotions and responses? So I'll give everyone about 30 seconds to fill in here. Another 10 seconds. No pressure. All right, let's see where we're at.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
one thing it wasn't on that little quiz that I'm running into more and more.
Okay.
And I may sound old here, but in the workplace, we have various generations. And I find that my 20 somethings, like the older people grew up in an era where messages come down, whether they like it or not, they just go with it. The younger guys, they want to be in on the decision. They want to know how it was made, who was involved in it. And so when big change happens, sometimes that's more easily forgotten. But if we can get in front
Mm.
of it, it makes a difference.
No, you bring up a great point there, Monica. And now I'm happy you said that because honestly, over the past 6 or 8 months, we've heard more and more about that. We're asking questions around how are we managing generational differences amongst our organization? And even further to that, like what's happening when employees are stepping into management positions. They're not managing people that, for lack of a better example, that could be their parents. How is that impacting the work situation and team dynamics and things along those lines? And so, yeah, I think to your point, that could have been another response to this around how are we looking to support team members from a generation perspective. It might be an upcoming webinar topic because I've heard it a couple of times now, and so it may be maybe worthwhile. Thank you for that. Otherwise, sharing the results that we have here, it seems like there's two things that really come up for people. And it's around how are we managing team members' resistance to change and how are we maintaining morale amongst team members? And so we'll take a look at like the next pieces of content here, and we'll try to use this lens as to managing team members' resistance to change and maintaining morale as we move forward here. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up in terms of framework to be able to better understand how to communicate change is actually something, a technique that's really commonly used in sales. However, I feel like it can really have an impact when communicating change to your team as well. And it's looking at this feel, felt, found framework. And so I'll give just an example of scenario around how you can use this feel, felt, found framework to better kind of communicate change. And so the first piece around feel is really acknowledging how are people feeling, and demonstrating that you're listening, that you have an understanding, and really respect their perspective. You could be using phrases like, I understand how you feel, or I can see why you might feel this way. And so an example of this could be, I understand you may be feeling anxious or uncertain about upcoming changes to how we collaborate as a team. If we look back just a few years ago, Imagining the pandemic here, how a lot of us are shifting from in-person to virtual, this might be something that might be coming up around, how are we collaborating as a team, or what kind of tools might be we be using to collaborate as a team. The next piece here is looking at the felt. So felt is really relating to how you or others have felt in similar situations. So it's really showing them you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling this way. And it can really help normalize their feelings of, not being unique to them, but rather a common experience for people. And so in this case, you might use phrases like, I felt the same way, or you're not the only one that's felt this way. And so an example here, maybe, I felt the same way when new collaboration tools have been issued. And I've worked with others in similar situations that have expressed your concerns. It's really helping normalize those concerns so they don't feel like I'm all alone. And then when looking at found, it's really being able to share what they found. It's letting them know that there is a light on the other side that they can get to, and that, the change could actually be more positive than the pain they might go through in the first instance. And so this could look like, however, what I've found is that embracing these new tools at first can be daunting, but in the long run can actually help our team come together stronger and work more effectively. So really be able to kind of share that, again, that light at the tunnel, so to speak. So I felt this feel, felt, found framework can be an easy way of just introducing change and helping, kind of calm some of the nerves that might come up when talking about change within the workplace. It won't be the only thing that you'll use in your arsenal, but it can be one tool to help kind of facilitate that conversation moving forward. One of the things that comes up when we're talking about change, it can be very similar to a difficult conversation. In the short term, it leads to discomfort, but in the long term, if we avoid it, it can really lead to long-term dysfunction. And so when we're communicating change, especially with someone who maybe isn't going to like the change that's going to happen, it can be really challenging and difficult. And so one of the ways we've noticed that can help alleviate some of kind of this pressure is leading with curiosity over judgment. And so, maybe a show of hands here. Has anyone ever led with judgment first in a conversation? I mean, I think we've all done it at least some point in our career or lives from that perspective. And living in the land of judgment is a place we know quite well. And we wait and might be a subject of perceived superiority over others, or judging their words or actions or inactions not taken. But there is a way that can be much more effective and serve a purpose. And so when we're leading with judgment, it can actually be really emotionally draining. It can be closing off from ideas and leads really from a negative place. But when we shift from judgment to curiosity, we're really looking at, a perspective that can be a lot more freeing. So where curiosity is the opposite of judgment, you're leaving judgment behind to really truly seek to understand. And who knows what you might be able to discover. And so when we're leading with curiosity, you're looking to avoid assumption making. You're really practicing to actively listen and understand and making that genuine attempt to understand where somebody else is coming from. And what I've noticed here, and even just for myself as a coach, is making that genuine attempt to understand, even if you feel differently. And it's so easy to feel like, well, you know what, this change is really easy, and we'll just get through this hump, right? It's just a new tool we have to be able to learn, and it'll take no time at all, and we'll get over that. But if somebody else might see it very differently. And so by being able to utilize curiosity, it allows you to see it from their way and be able to then come back to that empathy map and decide, how do I want to move forward? How can I best support this person from there? And so some of the ways you might be able to do this is simply by asking some probing or clarifying questions coming from a place of curiosity. And so I'm going to use some examples here. And Missy, I'll get back to I saw you mentioned something in the chat. But some probing questions you might be able to ask from a curious perspective is, what impact do you think this will have? What was your intention? Why do you think that this is? You can bring up different clarifying questions like, well, can you help me clarify? Well, what did you mean by this? Or this is what I understood. And so by asking these types of questions can really help open up the door for more transparent and open communication, especially when we're communicating or having a difficult conversation. Now, I will write one caveat, that tone and body language matters. I actually had a presentation last year, and I picked somebody out and asked them, "Oh, well, can you read the first question here?" And they said, well, what impact do you think this will have? And I said, okay, that's one way of asking the question. But if we were to come at it from a place of curiosity, how might it sound? And it kind of clicked a little bit, where your tone and body language can really have an impact in terms of how you're asking questions and how they might be perceived by others. And so, Missy, I'll just come back to your comment here. So she's mentioning that, you're not the only one, doesn't feel authentic. So when somebody jumps on, so it's not just me, why is the company doing this? I would really go more into the coach approach and try to determine where their concerns are coming from. And so I appreciate where you're coming from, Missy. And I think what you're pointing at, maybe I can jump back to the slide, was when looking at this slide here, instead of just stating this is how you feel or I understand what you feel, try asking questions to better understand, well, why is this coming up for you? So maybe coming back to some of the probing questions or curiosity questions that we have here to help better understand where they're coming from. No, definitely. I could see how that shift in mindset or shift in questioning can lead to further changes. I think with the feel, felt, found framework, it's really just an entry point into a conversation and not the end all, and kind of provides like an easy framework to get things started. And I agree with you. Always asking more questions can always lead to more insights from there.
If I may, Scott,
Yeah, go for it.
I try to never say, I understand how you feel, because I don't. I don't know
Mm,
all of the stuff that they're bringing. I don't know the baggage, the previous experiences, who else is in the room, all those things. I don't know. So I can't do that. I understand how you feel, because it's like, nope. And if I ask questions, that one I was like, hey, more power to you. If you can use that, great. Because the more tools we have, the better. But I'm like, I would crash and burn so hard.
No, I love it, Missy. I'm curious. So I think you mentioned, can you give me a shift? What can we ask? What can we say that would feel empathetic, and still resonate with allowing people to feel like they're not alone?
I would say, I want to understand more. I hear what you're saying. I want to understand more where you're coming from and what's bringing this up for you. So can we dive deeper into that and
Mm,
start just asking
mm.
questions?
No, okay, I like that. And if I can add to that, that must be hard.
Mm.
Just something as easy as acknowledging that, the feelings they have must be hard or that can be difficult. And it's not saying I understand, but rather just saying that, well, it seems like that thing must be hard.
Or I'm sorry you're feeling this way. Let's unpack it.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I know we're
that
kind
must
of
be.
on the spot here.
There's certain things. Yeah, right. There's certain things like that must be hard, unless it's like somebody died or something. I don't see myself saying that, at least not off the cuff. Um, and yeah, so I'm sorry comes out a lot. I'm sorry person.
And
And
I think it's situational. I mean, asking that question to somebody who just lost someone might hit like a lead balloon. But we just had layoffs at one of my
mm,
companies I work with, and getting people when they come after they've just been told they lost their job, just sitting with them for a second and go, I know this is hard. Um, it lets them sort of like, because they see
mm,
us as management and we made this decision and we're taking their life. And then in that moment, they're thinking, how am I pay my mortgage? How am I going to do this and that? And just giving them a moment and just saying, I know this is hard, feels really different than it would if I were, you just lost somebody.
mm. No, I think that's fair, Monica. Yeah.
So one thing to add to what Missy shared earlier is, and it's also about managing that generational shift. And the reality is, I've been in a situation myself where I've said, I understand. And the employee was 23 years old and looked straight in my eyes and said, no, you don't. And you're kind of taken back by that. And you realize that, it's not about how you say it or what you say, but it's really about how that person's left to feel after they've come to you and have been very vulnerable to share
Mm,
an issue that they may be having. So there isn't, I think, a perfect question. It's about really being able to read your audience
mm,
and putting yourself in the shoes of that individual who is, quite frankly, being very vulnerable and coming
mhm,
to share an experience. And one of my greatest mentors has ingrained it in me to say it's about the interaction, Anna. It's about how that person left after they shared
Mm,
with you their experience. So still learning, even though, over 2 decades of HR experience, the challenge is you just can never really perfect
mhm,
it. You just got to know who you're talking to.
And being authentic. People react to authenticity. If
Yeah.
you're being the most you can be, it's enough.
Yeah. And that has to be enough. And I think we need to give ourselves grace, especially in our positions, because that
mm,
is usually an area that we all struggle. Is it enough? Right. And the reality is we're not perfect, right? But at the end, it's about really making that person feel that we are genuinely um, curious about what they're
mhm.
going through, and we're here to help solve. We may not have all the answers, but we're here to help solve that issue, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. Hopefully, it
Mm.
yields some positive results, but it doesn't always yield the results, that we anticipate. But we just roll with the punches, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I appreciate everyone for chiming in and providing again sharing from your experience. Because at the end of the day, none of us are perfect. We're all learning, no matter how many decades we've been in the role, and we're always looking to adapt to those in front of us. Because yeah, because sometimes we might understand, and sometimes we might not understand at all, and we'll be let know known.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. Um, Moving on from this piece here, so looking a little bit around, communicating change effectively. And so here are just a few different steps we might be able to take in terms of how we might be able to communicate change effectively within the workplace. And so one is around, really communicating why the change is necessary. If I look back at some of the chat notes at the beginning of the conversation today, it was, well, some people know why it's necessary, or leadership has made a decision, but they haven't brought in the input of everybody, or they haven't shared that why with everybody. And so, the need for change can be clear to some people, but can also be unclear to others. And so it's really crucial to help everybody understand, why is this change necessary? Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to agree with it. And let's be honest, most of the time, not everyone will agree with it. And that's okay too. But as long as everybody has an understanding as to why these decisions are being made, and maybe even understanding as like what the impacts are. So what has led to this decision? Another piece that comes up that's really important is involving change ambassadors. And so it's not just, hey, we're making this change, everyone understands, great, and then it stops there. But rather, it's really ensuring that, team members need to hear from change ambassadors throughout the process. So, we've announced that we're going to make this change. How are things going? What are the challenges that we're foreseeing? What kind of support is being implemented along the way? And so, from beginning to end, being able to be really transparent around the changes that are happening and around, how it's impacting people along the way can help ease some of that transition. I know I'm in a room with a lot of HR professionals, and so I know this will resonate. Put people, not process first, right? And so, meaningful change really requires people to change and adopt new processes, not the other way around. And so it's really critical to be able to kind of create that emotional connection between, the why this is happening, the what, to really help foster change over time. So again, this is coming back to that communicating with empathy, asking Missy brought up some of those coach approach questions, to adapt, like Anna mentioned, adapting to who's in front of you, whether it be age, experience, wherever that might look like, or even culture. And so being able to put those people first over the processes along the way, and then leveraging communication channels. So being able to, choose various methods of communication. And so it's not like, well, we did the update in our monthly newsletter. Like, what is everyone, what's the issue here? But rather having different methods of communicating how changes are going to ensure that everyone is involved and everyone feels like they're on the same page, and ensuring that it's coming from all stakeholders. It's not just the CEO is saying this, but now my manager is actually doing something different, because again, that creates that inconsistency of communication. And so I know it's not always easy to have consistency across the board, but always trying to strive towards that. And I mentioned the question, what do we do when it's profit over people? I'm actually going to flip the question to the group. Anybody ever work in an organization or see this within a company around, they're more of a profit over people situation? I'm sure Anne is not the only one. I'm getting a few smiles here on camera. So if you'd be willing to,
Is
or maybe I'll ask Anna, what kind of prompts this question for you?
Well, I think for me, like most organizations coming out of COVID-19, the reality is it has inherently become, in some industries, in some organizations, people over profits, right? Sorry, profit over people.
Mhm,
Any change in the business that, sort of triggers some kind of change management. And the reality is there's some change in the work that we do every day.
mm,
It's how do we do it in such a way that it's going to either drive down cost, it's going to increase utilization, or it's going to add some level of increased productivity. And I feel that sometimes, although we try to perfect the best practices as it relates to, what necessitated the change
mhm,
initially, and really canvas the feedback from, those stakeholders who are directly impacted by that change. Sometimes that change can result in less people, right? Rifts in some cases where
mhm,
it truly hasn't driven the impact to the employee specifically. And that's been something that I've been struggling with the last few years. It's
mhm,
how do we navigate this change in such a way where employees really feel that it's going to help them, and it's going to help them in a good way, and not necessarily adding increased work to their day or increased
mhm.
processes to their day, but the change is really going to drive meaningful impact to them personally. And I know it's something that many are challenged with these days, and I certainly don't have the answer. And I'm often asked that question at the board level. But the reality is I don't have the answer. That's the truth.
I'm I'm curious, and you don't have to answer if it doesn't come up for you, but will the change actually have a positive impact on employees? Or is it trying
Sometimes
to figure
no.
out how to flip it? And if it's sometimes
Sometimes
no,
no. Yeah.
then that is difficult to be able to showcase, right?
So what comes up for me when you're asking this question, because I've been there, um, like the transparency of everybody has to understand that we have stakeholders, that they need to make money, that we're in business to make money. I mean, that's a bottom line, right? Um, and I've been in riffs and all that other non-fun stuff. I don't love those communication pieces either. But part of it is staying afloat, having a job. I know that's like at a basic 101 level, right? But there's got to, changes that are that bad. There's got to be something. There's got to be something you can hang on to. Otherwise, everyone's mass exodus, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but that is one. If you don't understand at the end of the day that people have to make money and this is why we're in business, um, then you need to go to like nonprofit or something, like
It's
because
true. No,
because
you're right.
and my boss, my CEO boss has he reports to the stakeholders. He
Mhm.
has to, we all report to somebody and we all have things we have to do. And one of the things we have to do is report to those people and make them money. Or we can't stay in business, or we're going to get sold or merged or acquired or shut down.
I'm glad that you said that, because really that is the response. It's you've got a job.
And it
And you
seems
get
horrible to say that,
it
but
does. It does. But I think that speaks to, again, the transparency, and no answer is an answer. It's best to say you get to report to work tomorrow kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, obviously not quite so bluntly, right? Because
Right.
yeah, right. But like the bottom line is we have to do what we have to do to stay in business and position ourselves to make better choices and whatever. Also, if we're making money, the hope is obviously that
Mm,
eventually that can trickle down to the employees,
Correct.
right? If we're fat, if our budget is fat and we have too many employees and, that no one's getting raises, no one's getting promotions, no one's getting anything. But if we can position ourselves to, make that turnaround and come back, that only helps us in the long. That's all I have. That was the only thought that came to mind when you said that.
No, that's great. Thank you.
And I would just say I'm coming from a different perspective because the companies I have worked for over the last 25 years are generally small biotech companies who aren't making money. So every decision is about life or death. It's like if we don't have revenue to get research into the clinic, then none of us have jobs and patients suffer. So it's not even, we don't even have, the profit isn't even a discussion for us because we're not revenue generating.
Mm. And so just being able to, in your example there, Monica, just survive long enough to be able to get to a point to get our solutions to service seems to be the biggest driver forward.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's not an easy question to answer, like you mentioned, right? From that perspective, and appreciate the the insights that Missy and Monica brought forward as well. And I think coming back to some of the stuff we talked about, being empathetic, right, and being able to have that approach of this is some of the challenging things we need to decide now, so that there's a brighter future tomorrow. And no, it may not be tomorrow, but it won't be forever. If there is a negative impact from there, and the goal is to have that negative impact today so that we have a better impact or an easier time in the future or around to be there. Okay. Any other questions around, communicating change effectively or anything else coming up around this piece? No? Okay. So we'll jump into the last section here around fostering a trusting environment. And so one of the things that I always bring up when we're talking about trust is this idea around psychological safety. And so psychological safety is really defined by how group members believe they're viewed by others. And trust is really the foundation for psychological safety within the workplace. And so when individuals have trust in their colleagues, when they have trust in their leaders, they're more likely to feel psychologically safe to express themselves openly. And when we're talking about communicating change, psychological safety is critical to be able to have those open conversations and to be able to trust that, what, Anna, if you're telling me that, things are tough and I should be happy that I have a job tomorrow, and we're doing this so that we have a better future for next year, then you know what? It makes that a lot easier to palate or a lot easier to absorb because we have that trust and we have that psychological safety that's already been built out. And so there's a few things that come up when we're looking to develop a trust-based work environment and really help create that psychological safety. One is ensuring we have a safe space to be able to share ideas, speak up, ask questions without the fear of being punished or embarrassed based on what's coming up. So it's really looking at giving your team a voice. The second piece here is really showing that you trust your team. It's not just telling them you trust them, but showing them how are you trusting them. And it can be really critical, especially if you're working in a remote or hybrid environment. Trusting that work will get done, communicating, trusting your team, and aligning the actions with your words. And then the third piece here is, have you ever heard the words, I trust you, but then you have a manager that's actually breathing down your neck and pestering you with follow-ups, and those actions aren't showing that there's actually trust there and ensuring there's alignment between what's being said and what's being executed within the organization. And so if you do want to show your team member trust, just do it. Give them the space to succeed or potentially fail, but be there to provide them support when they need it and as it comes up from there. And so I have a few things around strategies for creating a trusting environment and just recognizing, I'll go through them just a little quickly as we're coming up on time here as well. So one of the things that comes up is around encouraging open dialogue. So looking to initiate, regular team check-ins with everyone, provides really an opportunity to share updates, challenges, suggestions, and also encourages active listening by providing, or you can help encourage active listening, providing training on effective communication skills, or even just being a role model around what does active listening look like. It's hard to expect your team members to practice active listening if you're not doing it yourself. And so it's much more easy to be that role model for team members. Otherwise, looking at empowering employees' voice. And so, establishing can be establishing anonymous suggestion boxes or even online forums where employees can really submit ideas or concerns. Or, the next step is really helping build up that trust and psychological safety that if employees or if a team member has an issue, they're actually willing to come and tell you about it rather than griping about it behind your back or to your team members or whatever else that comes up. And so, this could even look like hosting regular town hall meetings at an organizational level, or having just team meetings, or even individual one-on-one meetings to be able to better further understand and give employees a voice. And then finally here, aligning words with actions. And so, again, this come up anything around, training, or even, emphasize the importance of aligning actions with stated values, recognizing that, what, we don't have values that are just on the wall. We're actually implementing them and actioning them within our organization, and this is how we're doing it. And then finally here, recognizing and rewarding trust building behaviors to help reinforce the importance within organizations. And so those are a few ideas, a few strategies that kind of come up around creating a more trusting environment within the workplace. And so just doing a quick review here of what we've looked at so far. We've looked at strategies for creating a trusting environment. We've talked a little bit about the importance of psychological safety and trust. We've looked at, 4 steps for communicating change effectively. We also have looked at, how can we embrace curiosity over judgment and help us have a little more empathetic communication, and looking even at how we review and implement an empathy map, whether it's actually sitting down and filling out the map, or just asking yourself some of these questions as to, how is this impacting my team members? What am I seeing them doing? What are they thinking? What are their fears and concerns? And how can I help alleviate some of those fears and concerns and show them the positive aspects of this? And then even looking at a framework for empathetic planning. And so as we look at wrapping up here a little bit, we do have an offer. For those of you that did find this helpful, I mean, at Intuitive Performance, we're really focused around, how can we bridge the gap between knowledge and action? And so our goal really is, and we get lit up around empowering leaders within their career. And so both myself, my business partner, Ange, if you haven't had an opportunity to meet her through one of our webinars or on LinkedIn, we're both passionate about coaching. We're passionate about helping support others in their careers. And so if you'd like to unpack some of the things we talked about here today, or maybe even something else that might be coming up for you in your workplace, feel free to book a 30-minute session. We're more than happy to spend some time together and be able to discuss some of the challenges that might be coming up, identifying roadblocks, and best of all, provide you some actionable tips to walk away with, or you'll walk away with actual steps that'll help elevate your career or overcome some of those obstacles. And so I'm just going to share a link in the chat here. And I think Missy shared a few as well. And so if you, did this work? I think it worked. Yeah, so we have a Calendly link there. So if you do want to book a call, more than happy. Click on it. It'll either be with myself or my business partner, and we'll be more than happy to spend some time and help you work through this. Otherwise, I'll stick around for a few minutes for any questions, but really appreciate everyone taking the time here today to get your input and insight around leading through change and communicating change. And I hope you found some insights that you can take away and bring to your workplace as well. I'll just